Well, hello and welcome to our next session in our Higher Education Leadership Symposium for Fall 2024. I am Dr. Edwards, and I am the instructor for our Master's of Education and Educational Administration program with an emphasis in higher education. And today, our next group is presenting about leadership and advancement. Take it away.
Yes, this is the Leadership and Advancement Group. My name is Corey Brown. We also have Deza Hill, Brandon Hogan, Charles Payne, and Daniel. And I am sorry, Daniel, if I mess up your last name. Um, I want to try to say it, but I feel like I've messed it up all semester so far. Daniel S. Um, so just a little on institutional advancement. I've actually worked at Tarleton now for 15 years, and 13 of that has been in institutional advancement and annual giving. And it's a job that I absolutely love. But institutional advancement is a term that refers to the departments within higher education that are primarily responsible for fundraising. And it can be broken down into several different smaller departments, such as alumni relations or alumni engagement, annual giving, such as myself, which by definition is gifts on an annual basis that are $25,000 or less. You have sometimes in some institutions, not at Tarleton, but marketing and communications can be housed underneath this division. Development, which is like your major gift fundraisers, those are $25,000 gifts and above. Um, your data management, advancement services is typically how you'll hear that one titled. And sometimes, again, not at Tarleton, but government relations can sometimes be housed underneath this division. At Tarleton, that is actually underneath the president's office. And so the goal of institutional advancement is to promote the institution's image and brand, of course, and also primarily to encourage philanthropy. So, literature review, and I'll let Brandon take this over.
Thank you, Corey. Can I get the next slide, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you so much. A lot of our research is based on the book A Guide for Leaders in Higher Education, Competencies, Concepts, and Tools, which was written by Rubin, DeLisi, and Gigliotti. Now, for leaders to be successful, the authors emphasize the importance of developing a greater understanding of the following key focus areas: leadership dynamics in higher education, understanding institutional structures and cultures, the importance of strategic alignment with institutional missions. Now, I know I only limited to 3 key points on there. It's far vast and more than that, but that is what they emphasize for a majority of what they want leaders to know the most on there. Now, once a leader does know this particular information, there are some practical insights for a leader to have and that they provide, and one of them being case studies illustrating real world applications. They not only want you to know the information in those focus areas, but they want you to apply it into your day to day life within your institution and prospective department, as well as provide tools for adaptability and resilience within higher education. And I know that a majority of us do know this already, that within higher education, the landscape is ever changing on a day-to-day basis. And they did emphasize that quite a bit, that within a leader, they should be adaptable. In addition, leaders should not only just manage processes and resources within their care, but also empower and inspire team members. Can I get the next slide, please? Thank you. Now, practical insights, the examples that they had in there, how to deal with, I'm so sorry, can you go back actually? Thank you. So sorry.
That's okay.
Practical insights, examples of how to deal with an emergency. If an emergency were to come up in the workplace, how would you deal with that? How would you utilize your resources in order to prepare for an emergency? What a formal and informal leader looks like in the institution, and how to assess an outcome. If you do implement something new within your department, how to assess the outcomes and how to adapt it in order for the results to be better next time. Okay, now I'm ready for the next slide, I promise. Uh, Now, the authors do also emphasize the nature of leadership styles and how they are multifaceted within not only leaders, but also within institution. The framework that they provide in their book is intended to aid in the development of key competencies such as strategic thinking, effective communication, ethical decision making, as well as collaboration. And again, there are more than just those categories right there, but they are the fundamentals in which you can build upon if you are an aspiring leader or if you are a current leader. How can we develop those even more? And they do give you some applicable examples so that way you can develop those even more. And the way that you're not stagnant in your leadership on there. Now, it also provides leaders with tools and strategies throughout to help navigate through present day challenges, such as the impact of technology and the demographic shifts in student populations. Like I said, the landscape is always changing for us, but they do give those examples for us, and it can be a challenge, but it can also benefit a leader depending on how they react to the situation at hand. Um, and in conclusion, the book not only provides a well rounded toolkit for leaders and aspiring leaders, but also a roadmap to foster an impactful leadership practice that benefits the institution, leaders, as well as the community. Thank you.
So individuals and institutions that were observed, there was Tristan Wheeler of University of North Texas and the UNT Diamond Eagles Society. Julie Witt of Texan Christian University. Dr. John Gladchuck of Tarleton State University. John Lippincott in the Association of Governing Boards. And then Jesse Peisers. And then there were numerous institutions in his career. So to start, Tristan Wheeler, University of North Texas. This was done by Tristan is responsible for UNT's Diamond Eagles Society, as mentioned before. That was established in 2017. It engages students and teaches them the importance of philanthropy by challenging student members to raise $1,000. Which I think is phenomenal. This is actually something that we struggle with, student philanthropy at Tarleton. And it's just because it's never really been a part of the culture at Tarleton. When student gifts were a thing, it was actually like there was like the Pearl Mahan Rock, and then there's monuments or murals and things like that, but never like cash gifts that support things. So I think this was really cool to read about and just to kind of hear some of their techniques. The society emphasizes leadership development by encouraging students to adapt their leadership styles based on team dynamics, utilizing models like style leadership and personality-based approaches. John Lippincott in the Association of Governing Boards. This was observed by Charles. Some of the points that were gathered out of this was transformational leadership has a huge impact on the success of campaigns. Effective communication with external stakeholders is key to building lasting partnerships. And successful campaigns align fundraising goals with institutional missions and emphasize long-term strategic planning. This approach reinforces the need for data-driven and strategic long-term planning and advancement efforts, offering important insight for higher education institutions. And then Dr. Jesse Peisers, and again, like I said earlier, numerous institutions under his career, but his experience aligns with the skills approach as well as style approach to leadership, requiring knowledge and expertise to succeed in advancement and requiring leaders to adapt to the situation. Dr. Peisers has been at numerous different institutions, as said, but has helped tremendously with his approach to leadership. Frequent transition between institutions did raise some questions about the effectiveness of his leadership in advancement, as it might slow down relationship building and actually bringing dollars to the door. And I can kind of attest to this too. At Tarleton, we've actually seen 5 vice presidents for institutional advancement in the last 6 or 7 years. And so I can attest to this, just the kind of the trust with donors, and it did slow us down just a little bit. Thankfully, we've had Tony Vidmar for the last 2 years, so we're kind of coming out of that, but I can attest to that point. And then Dr. Pizer's adaptability and experience remain central to his success. And then Dr. John Gladchuck and Julie Witt, they were very similar in the observations, and so we kind of combined the two, but both of them exhibit servant and transformational leadership styles. What I observed with Dr. Gladchuck, and he's actually been at Tarleton for just a short amount of time, but specifically to annual giving, as donor trends change, and younger alumni want to give to more restricted funds and more focused areas across an institution, it's important that we have a leader like Dr. Gladchuck that with his transformational leadership style that's very encouraging. Some of these different trends can sometimes become a little frustrating, especially when you're used to working a certain way, bringing in donors through the door. And just his experience and just his encouragement, his motivation, the way he came in really and transformed our department has been awesome. So Dr. Gladchuck and Julie Witt both prioritize relationship building, which is obviously very key in donor relations, institutional advancement, and strategic communication, making these 2 areas key to long-term success. Dr. Gladchuck's experience, and I'm sorry, I gotta move there we go, shows how a leader's ability to prioritize the team's needs and create a strategic vision positively impacts advancement efforts. And I would say, just based on what we read about Julie as well, I would say the same about her. Dr. Gladchuck, and I can speak to this obviously because I work under him, but one of the first things he asked when he started at Tarleton was, what do we need as a division? And then he broke that down into our different departments. And so I can attest to that, how it has positively impacted our advancement efforts. And then some of the top questions that we gathered out of our observations, just the overall impact of leadership changes response. Does leadership change cause a sort of mistrust for donors? And I talked about that briefly with just the turnover in vice presidents. After looking at UNT's Diamond Eagle Society, what other leadership programs like this exist at other universities and how do they benefit their students and the university? We noticed that Dr. Peisers mentioned leading advancement in communications and marketing for Texas A&M University San Antonio on Instagram. Are these expectations realistic? And do you have a work-life balance at all? How institutional advancement and scholarships coordinate with one another, which is huge. We have actually host a scholarship luncheon at Tarleton where we bring donors and scholarship recipients together, and they get to have lunch together and chat. So the working relationship between our 2 offices is huge. Okay, so we're gonna move on to expert interviews.
Okay, so during this time, we interviewed several people and got several insights on how they lead and how they um, work in fundraising and advancement. So our first interview, he was Janice Horick, the executive director at Tarleton. Um, she led the plant giving program and serves as the major gift officer. She mentioned that she likes to use the situational leadership in her role to make um, decisions and to lead her team. Her recommendations, when asked, were that people exercise patience and that it takes time to build up a relationship with somebody in order to get them to donate and to contribute and become donors of the university. Um, our next interviewee was Jake Logan, the Vice President of Institutional Advancement at the University of Texas in El Paso. And his leadership style that he described was more a transformational leadership style. Um, he said that he likes to lead his staff by inspiring and motivating them and following through on promises that he makes them, not just making empty promises and not following through. Is was one of the key things that he mentioned. Can I get the next?
Oh,
Oh,
where did it go? There we go.
there we are. So we have Michael Hutchinson, the Vice President of Institutional Advancement, as well as helping in the Marketing and Communication Department at McMurray University in Abilene, Texas. His team has had a record-breaking fundraising for his past 2 years that he mentioned and that he was proud of. He recommended a more servant leadership style in his area, and caring about your workers and team is important for any leader to have to help the team and benefit everyone in their role. Um, his One of the things he mentioned was that the most satisfying part of his time in higher education was the impact he's had and how he's able to change lives in higher education. Um, the next interview that we had was Mike Skaggs, the Director of Development in the College of Education at Tarleton. He stated more that influence is an important part of leadership, and that just by simply influencing someone to a set action or goal or um, uh, style is an important part of leadership, and that in that aspect, everyone can be a leader just by simply influencing people and influencing someone. He recommends being flexible and building relations and listening as a major part of his job to build these connections and um, get these donors to the university. He mentioned that Tarleton has a comprehensive plan to raise $200 million by 2030. And all of that he was working on to get to that goal. Our last interviewee that we had was Megan Brown, who was the Director of Grants and External Funding at Hill College. She focuses primarily on government grants. Her team leadership is important, was what she mentioned as her leadership style, that she likes to lead her team and make sure that everyone understands their contributions and role in the team, and stated that that was an important part of the leadership role. Thank you. So some of the takeaways that we gathered was that a majority of all of our interviewee subjects, I think, stated that building relationships and creating these friendships with donors is pretty much one of the most important parts of their jobs in order to acquire people to donate to the university and to have these fundraisers. In order to do that, communication, clear and concise, was pretty much agreed upon by all of the interviewees as a very important part of it, and that without communication, they wouldn't be able to do their job or have these donors contribute to their causes. Being a flexible and a caring leader was important for a leader to succeed. Uh, like I already mentioned with Mike, influence is a type of leadership. So there are different ways for a leader to lead from each of them. Servant leadership and transformational leadership was mentioned as an effective leadership style from several of our interviewees. Uh,
Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Payne, and I'm happy to be with y'all tonight. I'm going to go over best practices that we took away from our webinars. The first one's going to be Brooks A, and it focused on fundraising and development for nonprofit leaders. And for each one of these, I just took the three biggest best practices from each one. So for this one, the number one best practice would be build long-term donor relations and engage donors by understanding their motivations and fostering deeper involvement. The next one would be align fundraising with mission, ensure fundraising aligns with institutional mission and demonstrates impact. And then lastly, involve donors beyond giving and create opportunities for donors to engage in decision making and stay informed on outcomes. The next one we're going to look at is Martin Lundy and focus on charitable giving trends 2024. And their best practices are adapt to digital giving trends and invest in online platforms and make digital giving easier. The second one is emphasize transparency, be clear about how donations are used, and offer reports on outcomes. And then lastly, monitor sector trends and stay updated on post-pandemic donor behavior and adjust strategies accordingly. Next, we're looking at Ackerson, M, and the future of the donor pipeline. And some of the best practices we took away from them is diversify the donor base, engage younger, diverse donors, and address their interests. Next, leverage corporate and community partners and build relationships with corporations and local communities. And then lastly, tailor messaging to generational shifts, customize outreach based on generational preferences. Next, we look at Matt White and campaign innovation insights. And some best practices from him is use data to drive campaigns, to analyze donor behavior, to craft tailored strategies. Innovate with campaign design, incorporate creative approaches, and adjust based on feedback. And then focus on long-term campaign success by planning campaigns that sustain financial and mission-driven goals. Then we have Willis K, business leadership and the GR exit interview. And some best practices from this one were adaptability and leadership, adjust strategies based on real-time donor needs and results, embrace innovation, adopt new approaches in campaign based on feedback, and ensure leadership engagement. Leaders must actively engage with donors to build trust and drive success.
Okay, so for our conclusion and key takeaways, leaders within fundraising and stakeholder engagement require a diverse set of competencies, including strategic thinking, effective communication, ethical decision-making, and collaboration. Effective leadership can include a blend of various styles and approaches from servant leadership to transformational leadership. Fostering sustainable donor relationships means having transparency, adaptability, a diversified donor base, and utilizing data-driven strategies to ensure success. And leaders within fundraising prioritize being inclusive, innovative, and forward-thinking to address both current challenges and future opportunities. So, any questions?
Well, one question I have, I know you interviewed people at community colleges and universities. You did a great job of getting some great people to interview. Were there any striking differences in the way advancement is done in community colleges versus universities?
So I can kind of speak to that just actually from some of the conferences I've gone to where I've actually attended with community college and universities, but also even like health professionals that are like development officers at hospitals or, you know, organizations such as that. And for the most part, obviously our goals are the same to better the institution that we're working for. But the way that we communicate, I think, is the biggest difference. Just because, I mean, if you say, for example, if we're working for Cook's Children's and their fundraising department, what I send out is going to look a whole lot different than what I send to our donor base at Tarleton State University. And so I think for me, just working in the last 13 years, that's really what I see is the major difference is the way we communicate, and how we're trying to reach out and solicit donors. But obviously our goals are the same. And so a lot of the resources that we use are the same. It's just the way that we push those things out.
Thank you.
I think the biggest contrast is, between and a good contrast is I work at Hill College in Cleveland. We're in Cleveland and in Hillsborough primarily, and in Burleson is our dual credit campus. So just the magnitude of fundraising at Tarleton compared to Hill College, there's a huge contrast there. It was said earlier, $200 million by 2030. We're
That
not even on
actually
the
got bumped up to 250 million, by the way.
wow,
The
wow.
other
Okay.
day.
Well, thanks.
Crazy.
We're not even the same. We're not even the same state when it comes to things like that. So it does astound me at the difference between fundraising at my level and the fundraising at Tarleton or the four-year universities. It's pretty impressive.
Thank you. I know you talked a lot about communication and stakeholder engagement, and being able to phrase, I guess, the ask in terms of, why this is going to make a difference for the institution, because some people may say, well, why do you need all that money? But I think that, I watched the, State of the University for Tarleton earlier, and, there were a lot of things that were messages that, I think are designed to sort of captivate donors, right? To make, help them understand why it's important to give. It's not just, hey, we want $250 million, but, here's what we're going to do to make a difference in the lives of Texans. And so, and communication is a big part of that. And that's a big part of leadership is communication. So, great job. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.